Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
And I am Matthew Stockton.
Yes, you are, with a very bright sky behind you, so you seem like you're in silhouette and not lit very well today.
Banana shirt on.
Your banana shirt is on. How are things?
Things are okay. Just kind of quiet over the last few weeks, so...
Yeah, one day at a time with that, yeah.
Settling into a new life sans Steve.
Yeah.
My husband's best friend was up for the weekend, so they played board games all weekend, and I did lots of cooking, so...
Yeah, that sounds nice. You didn't cook for me, though, so...
No, I did not.
No.
I made a lovely courgette and blue cheese soup.
Oh, I saw.
Yummy.
I saw when you posted on Facebook.
And a Highland beef pie. Yummy, yum.
Oh, my gosh.
So good.
Your posts make me hungry, Matthew.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Our content is often intense, and some listeners may find it disturbing. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We are ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
It started on May 28, 1934, in Corbeil, Ontario at 2 in the morning. Oliva Dionne had summoned 2 local midwives in the middle of the night. His wife Elzire was in labor, and the family had only one doctor within reach. Alan Roy Defoe, a widower who lived in nearby Callander. Defoe was not a specialist. He had allegedly barely scraped through medical school and relied on common sense to provide medical care. He was the man available. A premature baby girl was there ahead of him, and another was on the way before he could remove his coat, roll up his sleeves, and wash his hands. Then another, then another, then another. The largest baby weighed only 2.5 pounds. The smallest weighed 1 pound 8.5 ounces. None of them measured longer than 9 inches. Defoe fetched a potato scale and weighed the lot in a clothes basket, 13 pounds 6 ounces in total. 5 identical girls, born 2 months early in a farmhouse in northern Ontario in the middle of the Depression to a Franco-Ontarian farming family that already had 5 children and very little money. Defoe's instructions were simple: keep them warm, feed them water from an eyedropper, bathe them in olive oil, and leave them alone. He told Oliva to make what he could of them. The babies were not expected to live beyond a few hours. They had no incubator. The babies were kept warm by the heat of an oven, hot water bottles, and heated bricks. When they had difficulty breathing, Defoe gave them a 10-part water, 2-part rum solution to revive them. One of them turned blue. He gave her 2 more drops of rum. When the 5 girls safely passed the 5th day of life, medical history was made. Never before, according to the records, had a full set of quintuplets survived that long. Elzire Dionne, her swollen legs subsiding, whispered, "Suis contente. If they die, they will go to heaven, and perhaps next year we will have another." They didn't die. And what happened next is the story. You are listening to Dark Poutine episode 424, Lives on Display, the Dionne Quintuplets. The news of the 5 live births spread before Defoe had even left the property. On his way out from the Dionne farmhouse that morning, he spotted Oliva's brother driving up to the barnyard. Defoe stopped him and told him he'd just become an uncle 5 times over. Then he drove to Colunder and told the post office, then a store clerk. The clerk told a reporter, and by that afternoon the story was moving across the wire services. By the following morning, Yvonne, Annette, Cécile, Emily, and Marie Dionne, 4 months premature, alive against all expectations, were front-page news in Toronto, Ottawa, and Winnipeg. Oliva Dionne was a man trying to feed 10 children on $20 a week in the middle of the Depression. He had a mortgage on the farm and no savings. Within days of the births, a Chicago promoter named Ivan Spear arrived with a contract. He wanted to bring the girls to the Century of Progress World's Fair as a paid exhibit. Defoe and the family priest, Father Routhier, advised Oliva to agree. He signed. He regretted it within days and tried to revoke the deal. Spear said the contract was binding. The contract and Oliva's brief willingness to sign it handed the Ontario government everything it needed, and they took full advantage. Attorney General Arthur Roebuck announced he was exercising his authority to break the contract and that the babies would, quote, not be racketeered in some vaudeville show, end quote. On July 27, 1934, Oliva and Elzire signed custody of the girls over to the Red Cross for 2 years. In exchange, the Red Cross would build a fully staffed nursery across the road from the farmhouse. It had 9 rooms, electricity, plumbing, and climate control. The farmhouse the Dionnes still lived in had none of those things. The girls moved across the road on September 21, 1934. They were 4 months old. When Elzire came to visit, a nurse remained in the room at all times. When Oliva came to the gate, a guard let him in. They were never alone with their own children. Then, before the Red Cross agreement had run for a year, the Ontario government moved again. In early 1935, Oliva and Elzire had accepted stage appearances in Chicago, introducing themselves to audiences as the parents of the world's most famous babies, collecting $1,700 a week. Premier Mitchell Hepburn, watching from Toronto, called it nauseating. By the 1st of March, a bill was headed to the Ontario legislature that would make the Dionne girls special wards of His Majesty the King until they turned 18 without their parents' consent.
I grew up in Ontario, and we actually learned a lot about the Dionne Quints in public school. It was actually something that was taught to us. So I know this story very well, and
yeah,
I'm going to express my genuine anger in advance for the listeners who will get there.
Okay, yeah.
Right? They're going to get there.
We didn't learn about it in Nova Scotia in school. We did not.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
It was Ontario, so it's, the home turf, maybe that's why.
Mm-hmm.
This shit gets bad, right? So a poor family makes one desperate decision during the Depression, right? After being encouraged by a doctor and a priest, and one that, frankly, would have just had probably people look at the 5 babies for a week at this fair, and then they'd be home, right?
Yeah.
Not the best parental choice, but probably harmless, and suddenly the government decides the parents are no longer fit to raise their own children.
Right.
The arrogance of that is unbelievable. That's the thing about institutional power. It almost always announces itself as benevolence. Nobody walks in saying, we're here to dehumanize your family and make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
They say those famous words, we're from the government and we're here to help, which makes me shudder all the time.
Yeah.
They say they're protecting children or improving outcomes or providing expertise or acting in the public interest.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the actual parents need permission to see their own daughters alone
which is
at this
insane.
point.
Insane.
Absolutely insane. And honestly, once a government becomes convinced it has a superior claim over your children because you're poor or unsophisticated or inconvenient, you're standing on extraordinarily dangerous ground historically.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you can see the motives, the government motives here. Like, I mean, this is for want of a better word, freak occurrence, right? Like that.
Let's make lots of money.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Exactly. There is an opportunity for sure. As for the Pet Shop Boys.
I speak Pet Shop Boy.
Yes, you do. So, with the girls becoming wards of the court, Oliva went to the press and protested as plainly as he could. He told reporters the government had no right to take his children. He said that he and Elzire had never been given a fair chance to prove themselves as parents. According to Sarah Miller's The Miracle and Tragedy of the Dionne Quintuplets, which draws on documented correspondence and press records, Elzire declared the day before the vote that if the bill passed, she would go to the hospital and take her babies herself, quote, even if I have to die on the spot, end quote. Despite that, the Ontario government passed the Dionne Quintuplet Guardianship Act in March 1935, effectively naming the girls special wards of His Majesty. The legislation would remain in effect until they turned 18. The Board of Guardians that took formal control consisted of Dr. Defoe, a North Bay judge named Joseph Vallon, Welfare Minister David Kroll, and Oliva Dionne, who was included on the board but had no practical power over the other three. The guardians controlled the girls' care, their finances, and every contract signed in their name. Defoe, the doctor, received $200 a month. Oliva received $100. Across the road, the nursery expanded. A staff house went up for the nurses and 3 police officers assigned to guard the compound. A 7-foot barbed wire fence went around the perimeter. Visitors had been arriving since the girls were newborns, pressing against windows for a look. By 1935, the daily crowd was a permanent feature of life in Corbeil. The board needed a solution. The girls were old enough to be displayed, but also old enough to become aware of it. The problem was handed to Dr. William Blatz, a University of Toronto child psychologist brought in to oversee the girls' development. Blatz proposed a purpose-built structure, a U-shaped observation gallery surrounding an outdoor playground. The gallery would be an unlit corridor 5 feet wide, its inner walls lined with windows, cork and felt on the floors to muffle footsteps, fine white mesh screens over the glass. According to Miller's account, which draws on Blatz's own documentation, the psychologist acknowledged the obvious tension plainly. Quote, this at first seems like a cold-blooded exploitation of these 5 children. End quote. He went on to argue that since similar arrangements had worked at his own school, it ought to be suitable for the Dionnes. The horseshoe-shaped gallery enclosed a grassy area with a jungle gym, wading pool, and a sandbox where, during multiple showings each day, visitors waited for a glimpse of the girls playing. The rules posted at the entrance gate: maintain silence, keep moving, do not speak to the children, and no photographs. The observation gallery opened on Dominion Day, 1936. By August, 3,000 to 6,000 people a day were arriving in Corbeil. Labor Day weekend that first summer brought 5,000 visitors on the Saturday and 7,000 on the Sunday. A 2-story pavilion near the hospital gates had a clock tower with long red hands that did not tell time. They were repositioned twice daily to announce the next showing of the babies. Across the road, Oliva Dionne watched the crowds pour past his farm. He understood what was happening. He also understood that he could not stop it. He had tried the courts, the press, and the legislature. The government held his daughters. The government set the schedule. And on the other side of the fence, 3,000 people a day paid nothing at all to watch the 5 little girls play, children who the adults around them thought didn't know that anyone was watching. They knew. The mesh screens had been designed to obscure the audience, but the girls were still aware of them. The sisters later wrote that they developed, quote, a shrewd idea of what would please the crowds the most, end quote. The audience was delighted when they ventured into the wading pool wearing their shoes and socks. When the gallery emptied, according to Miller, the girls would drag hollow building blocks to the perimeter fence, stack them, climb up, and wave through the screen at spectators who were no longer there. Cécile said it plainly in later years, quote, we knew they were there. More specifically, in the sisters' own words, quote, those one-way screens were, in truth, two-way screens. We could always see through them as one could see through frosted glass, end quote. By the summer of 1937, Quintland had become a more popular tourist destination than Niagara Falls. The operation had been running for 3 years, and the girls were toddlers. They had never left the compound. And the machine built around them was running at full speed with no sign of stopping. The souvenir stands appeared first. Before the observation gallery was even finished, entrepreneurs had staked out every available patch of road between the highway and the hospital fence. Refreshment booths, motor cabins, postcard vendors, hot dog carts. Auntie Legros, one of the midwives who had delivered the first 2 babies, opened a Coney Island-style tent beside the hospital and gave lectures about the births for paying customers. She graduated to a full refreshment stand the following summer. By the time the gallery opened in July 1936, the 2.5 miles from the main road had become a commercial corridor that one visiting journalist described as smelling of new lumber from a quarter mile out. Oliva Dionne ran his own booth on the family's land across the road, a large structure complete with giant silhouettes of his 5 daughters. He sat at a card table at the back, signing 400 autographs a day in slow, neat script. Locals estimated the booth raked in $700 a day. When one customer laid down a single cent for the autograph and walked away, Oliva Dionne set the price at $0.25 and kept it there. He understood the business. He had no choice but to participate in it. His daughters' images were legally controlled by the Board of Guardians, and every dollar from every contract went into a trust fund the Guardians managed. The booth on his own land, selling postcards, British woolens, and English toffees, was one of the few corners of the operation that belonged to him. The trust fund the Guardians were accumulating from endorsements was growing fast. Before the age of 2, the girls were the face of Quaker Oats, Lysol disinfectant, and Libby's homogenized baby food. By 1937, their names were on Palmolive soap and Colgate dental cream. Caro corn syrup, Carnation milk, Baby Ruth bars, each brand paid thousands for the right to put 5 faces on an advertisement. The Madame Alexander Doll Company's Dionne Quintuplet dolls became the most sought-after Christmas gift in North America. At one point, they outsold Shirley Temple dolls. The Ontario legislature trademarked the words quintuplet, quints, quins, and cinq jumelles. No one in Canada could use those words commercially without written consent from the board. The endorsement mechanism relied on photographs. Every contract demanded new images. Every holiday required a session weeks in advance so the pictures could be distributed to newspapers in time. According to Miller's account, the birthday cakes presented to the girls on camera were hollow props. The gifts stacked around them for the photographs were empty boxes. As Cécile put it later, quote, "The gifts were all empty boxes. The cake was a big hole. It was always like that. There was no cake at all when we cut it, end quote.
Those fake gifts and those hollow cakes are kind of the perfect metaphor for this whole story. Everyone was faking that what they were doing was, quote, good for the girls. Think about it, Mike. Like, everyone's faking, it's for the good of the girls. Everyone's telling themselves that and patting themselves on the back. But in effect, everything was designed to look joyful and wholesome and magical from the outside. Well, the actual emotional reality underneath all of this was totally empty. Everybody benefited from these girls. The government, small businesses, big businesses, even the parents.
Yeah.
Supposed doctors and experts built reputations, and the children at the center of it all grew up completely isolated, controlled, and obviously emotionally damaged. And
yeah,
they were treated no better than caged circus animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this story reminds me a lot of Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man. That is one of my favorite stories of all time. I mean, he and I share a birthday, which is interesting. Obviously not the same year. Because,
say it, Mike.
That would make me very old.
Say it. Say it.
What? I am not an animal. I'm a human being.
There you go.
Oh, jeez. But, you know...
The girls could say that as well. We are not animals. We are human beings.
Exactly. People have requested this episode a lot. A lot. Yeah. It's usually people from Ontario, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we all grew up hearing it. Yeah.
Yeah. 3 Hollywood films followed the endorsements. 20th Century Fox produced 3 features in the 1930s in which the girls appeared as themselves. Each one was a fictionalized story with a character modeled on Defoe as the heroic country doctor. The films played across North America and fed the endorsement cycle. The more people saw the girls on screen, the more their faces moved product. Defoe, the doctor who had given the babies no chance on the night of their birth, was, by the mid-1930s, one of the most famous men in Canada. During the Quintland years, he authored a guidebook for mothers and wrote a weekly advice column called, quote, The Quintuplets and the Care of Your Children. His face on an advertisement was nearly as bankable as the girls' faces. He collected $30,000 from 20th Century Fox for serving as a technical advisor on the films. He could command $1,000 for each single radio appearance. This was the gravy on top of his salary from the guardianship board. His public manner was, of course, humble. I did what any other doctor would have done, he told reporters. Is there anything remarkable about that? The public loved him for it. As Miller documents, drawing on contemporary press accounts, one admirer declared that Defoe had, quote, made super babies out of those 5 bruised-bodied midgets so sure to die, end quote. In 1934, he was nominated for a Nobel Prize. The following year, King George V awarded him the Order of the British Empire. So he was an OBE.
So remember, this is the dude who barely got through medical school and, quite frankly, just told the mom to push, and then when they were born said keep them warm, feed them water from an eyedropper, bathe them in olive oil, and leave them alone. And he didn't expect them to live. And now he has an OBE for doing that.
Right. Just because he was lucky enough to be there at the birth of these 5 girls. Like, that's all it was.
I know. The mom giving birth to 5 kids should get the OBE.
She absolutely should, because, as we've learned, hey, there weren't just 5 kids. There were 10.
Yeah.
So, give that mom an OBE. Holy smokes. That's a lot of work.
Lord love a duck.
As they say. The endorsement system depended entirely on the trust that the doctor had gained as the first to see 5 live births through early infancy. When Defoe told readers or listeners that only Palmolive was gentle enough for the Dionne skin, mothers across the continent switched soaps. A contemporary named Connie Vachon recalled in Miller's book, quote, My mother fed me the same food they ate. If they switched to carnation milk, I had to have it as well. I guess my mother just felt that what was good for them was good for her child, because they were given the very best." End quote. Defoe understood the arrangement precisely and was careful to protect it. One of the guardians, Judge Vallon, stated the underlying logic plainly in a private meeting recorded in Miller's account. Quote, "The children's health and education come first, but we must keep them before the public if we are to interest advertisers in contracts." End quote. The trust fund those contracts fed was meanwhile paying for everything at the hospital: the electricity and the water bills, the guard dogs' food, the nurses' salaries, the police officers' wages, and the construction of the observation gallery itself. The public washrooms in Quintland were built with quintuplet funds. The toilet paper in those washrooms was billed to the girls' account. The Dionne Quintuplets had become a $500 million asset to Ontario. By 1938, according to Miller's account of contemporary provincial records, they were generating $25 million a year in tourist revenue for the province. Against that, the trust fund held $600,000.
For some perspective in today's money, they were $11 billion asset, pulling in $525 million in tourist revenue, and the trust fund at this point was a relatively small $13.2 million.
That doesn't make any sense at all. That sounds like I have my own lens to look through, but, we've had 25 million downloads, for example, and I am not a millionaire.
Which brings me to the campaign I'm doing. Please be a Patreon or send us donut money. Okay, go on.
Yeah.
Our trust fund is low.
We have no trust fund.
And remember that trust fund, that's what it was at the time. And, we're going to hear all about that trust fund soon, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, the money was being spent, but the girls weren't seeing it. Anyway, Oliva Dionne had been watching this arithmetic for 4 years. In 1938, he demanded a judicial inquiry into the fund, charging that it was being, quote, dissipated by extravagance, and that Defoe was running what he called, quote, schemes to divorce the affections of the quintuplets from their parents, end quote. Oliva then demanded a say in hiring the nurses. He demanded his daughters be raised as French Catholic children, not as English-speaking subjects of a government institution. No inquiry materialized. The board made minor concessions, promising to build a new family home, and declared a new spirit of cooperation. The newspapers reported it as progress. Nothing changed on the ground. The new home remained on the architect's drawing table. The girls remained behind the fence. The cracks first appeared in other places. In August 1937, the Pittsburgh Press reported that a bout of what it called, quote, jitters and general irritability had come over the girls, brought on by the pressure of the crowds. The paper concluded that life in a goldfish bowl was proving too much for them. The exhibitions paused briefly, then resumed. As the girls aged, the rosy-cheeked toddlers of the newsreels were becoming ordinary-looking children. For 7 years, Oliva Dionne had been portrayed in the press in unredeeming strokes, while Defoe was cast as the kindly, all-knowing country doctor. By the time the quintuplets turned 7, the tide had turned. Oliva began to evoke sympathy. Even the nurses who had worked closest to the girls were beginning to say what they had long kept private. Nurse Louise de Caroline, Defoe's fiercest defender in the early years, visited Quintland in 1942 and was stopped at the locked front gate. A guard made her wait for permission to enter. "I saw in a flash," she told a reporter afterward, "how Mrs. Dionne must have felt all those years, waiting to have a locked gate open so she could see her own children." The United States had entered the Second World War in late 1941. Gasoline and rubber were rationed. Long-distance road trips curtailed. The American tourist traffic that had built Quintland thinned. The crowds outside the gate were a fraction of what they had been at the operation's peak, and the girls' commercial appeal was fading. The machine required cherubic children, but now it had 7-year-olds. In 1939, Oliva had filed 2 further lawsuits against Defoe. one for libel over a public skit that mocked his fatherhood, a second demanding that the doctor produce every advertising contract that bore the Quintuplets' name and deposit his personal profits into their trust fund. Rather than expose what he had earned, Defoe agreed to resign from the Board of Guardians. He would remain as the girls' personal physician, but his authority over their upbringing ended on January 15, 1940. The agreement stated formally that their, quote, physical, intellectual, moral, and religious education and social training, end quote, would pass to the Dionnes. In the sisters' own account, as documented in Miller's book, quote, we were brought up, in short, to practice deceit and accept it as a normal part of the pattern, end quote. By 1943, the guardianship had effectively collapsed. Defoe resigned as the girls' physician in February. He died of pneumonia that June at 60. The girls were not told for 6 months. In November of 1943, Yvonne, Annette, Cécile, Emily, and Marie crossed the road and moved into the new house that their earnings had built. Their parents were waiting. Their 5 siblings, for the most part strangers, were also waiting. The world that had watched them since birth assumed the story had a happy ending. It didn't. And we'll be right back after a quick break to tell you what happened. And we are back at the halfway point. Matthew, thoughts on this one that you're more familiar with than I was?
It's easy to place all the blame on politicians and officials here and companies, but the public has its own part in this story too, don't they? Millions of ordinary people lined up to participate in this. You know, they knew these children had been separated from their parents because there was like a bill in Parliament about it, right?
Yeah.
They knew the girls lived behind fences and a one-way glass, and they still came in droves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the uncomfortable question sitting underneath this whole story. If 5 children were being displayed behind mirrored glass today after being forcibly removed from their family, would we recognize it as monstrous immediately? Or would people still line up with snacks and cameras because everyone else is doing it?
Good question, Matthew. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, because history suggests human beings are very good at normalizing cruelty once it becomes organized, ticketed, and socially approved.
We see that exact thing with cancel culture. Exactly. A person makes a horrible mistake, and the entire internet now comes for them and says, burn them. Burn them to the ground. They should not exist. Let's erase that person.
There's tons of examples of it, right? Just people not, I think there's a distinct lack of people out there who think for themselves and go by a moral compass that we all I think we all have this moral compass inside of us. And I think people have become very good at having lost it or ignoring it.
I think at the core of us all, we have like that idea of what's good and what's
right and
what's
wrong.
Right and what's wrong.
Right.
There's a lot of noise that will push us in directions that go against that.
Yeah, and coming back to the Quints, right? Millions of people participated in this, right?
Millions.
Millions, and it's just terrible.
But then there's going to be those people who say, it was a different time, Matthew. It was a different time.
It was.
It definitely was.
It was indeed.
Yeah. The big new house was 19 rooms of yellow brick built on land the Dionnes had farmed for years. 9 bathrooms, a music room, a library paneled in knotty pine for Oliva, a basement playroom for the children, a crystal chandelier in the foyer, a walk-in refrigerator, an oil painting of the 5 girls above the living room mantel, artwork lifted from a 1940 calendar. The funds that had paid for it came from the daughters' trust. The girls themselves were not told this. They moved in on November 17, 1943. According to Miller's account, drawing on the sisters' own memoir, the transition came with almost no preparation. As Cécile described it, snapping her fingers, quote, like that, without being prepared, end quote. What they found inside was nothing like the nursery. For the first time in their lives, they were expected to wash dishes, scrub toilets, milk cows, and shear sheep. The 5 girls had been raised speaking French almost exclusively inside the nursery. Their older siblings, raised at home and more experienced in the outside world, leaned more toward English. The quintuplets had been raised by a rotating procession of nurses who were not allowed to raise their voices, but they now lived with parents who could, and did. Sharp words and swats came with mistakes. Oliva's dinner table plan on the first night set the tone. He separated the 5 girls among their siblings, one between every other 2 unfamiliar children, and told them in so many words that the era of the quintuplets was over. They were to see themselves as one child among now 12. No more divisions. For 9 years they had existed as a unit. Oliva intended to end that. They were not special in his house, and they would be treated as ordinary children from that point on. Their siblings remembered the reunion differently. Therese, the eldest, recalled music filling the house, card tournaments, sing-alongs, summer baseball games, berry-picking, and evening prayers in front of the big statue. Her sister-in-law, Audrey, who married into the family later, remembered Christmas as, quote, real family life, something like I had never seen before. The disagreement is not small. It runs through the entire record of the big house years, 2 sets of children describing 2 entirely different households. But the 5 sisters were not imagining things, nor, by all accounts, were the others. What the 5 of them remembered, parents who competed with each other in strictness, who used words like brat and stupid and crazy in anger, who demanded nightly rituals of affection the girls performed dutifully, the way you shake hands with someone you have just met. In each other's presence, the sisters later wrote, they competed to see who could treat us more strictly. There was no end to their instructions to do this or do that. End quote. What made it harder was that they understood what their parents had been through. 9 years of humiliation. Their father was the butt of continent-wide jokes about his litter of kids. Their mother had watched strangers raise her daughters across a road she could see from her kitchen window. They did not doubt the damage it had caused. They tried to love their parents. The love did not come naturally, and the effort manufacturing it ground on them every day. The performances continued. Oliva, who had spent years watching his daughters herded into the observation gallery twice a day, now accepted invitations for them to perform at victory bond rallies, launch warships, crown carnival queens, and appear on an Easter Sunday television broadcast saying the rosary. He allowed tourists to watch them during recess from the former nursery. He let visitors peer into their bedrooms while they feigned sleep. When there was an audience in the basement playroom, the Dionne Quintuplets gave private concerts for their father's guests. The name that had been used to sell Quaker Oats and Palmolive soap still had currency, and Oliva spent it. From the outside, everything looked as it always had. There were photographs of a united, happy family. The girls told the Toronto Star exactly what was expected. Quote, "It is lovely to have Mama and Daddy always near," Yvonne said. "I am so happy." End quote. In the sisters' later account, the press reports from those years contained, as they put it, quote, "truth and falsehood almost inextricably blended." End quote. One morning before 7, Yvonne woke to a sound from Emily's side of the room. Emily lay with her eyes open, face pale, her muscles locked rigid. Yvonne tried to wake her, called her name, and got no response. She ran for the others. By the time Oliva and Elzire arrived, Emily was convulsing with pink-tinged foam at her mouth. Elzire recognized it immediately. It was epilepsy, a grand mal seizure. Elzire's first instruction once the seizure had passed was silence. If word got out, she told them, it would shame the family. The doctor was called, but told that Emily had fainted. He attributed it to her first menstrual period and left. The diagnosis was kept inside the family. Emily's seizures came several times a week. Arguments could trigger them. So could physical strain. Yvonne took on the role of watching over her, keeping a spoon in the nightstand drawer to use during a convulsion so Emily wouldn't bite through her tongue. The sisters wrote later that this, too, became simply a part of how they lived. In 1947, the former Defoe Hospital was converted into a private school via Notre Dame, and the girls were enrolled there. They slept at the school on weekends away from the big house. For the first time in their lives, they had peers their own age who were not family. A classmate named Connie Vachon remembered that the girls held back for a long time, slow to trust and slower still to open up. Earning their confidence took real effort. What Connie and the other girls did not know was that Oliva had warned his daughters on the morning they left for Via Notre Dame. Quote, "Don't believe everything they tell you. They might try to influence you in the wrong way. Turn against your parents. If that happens, I want you to tell me right away." End quote. At school, the sisters found something close to normal life. They were given nicknames by the Mother Superior. Ivy, Netta, Sis, M, Pee-wee. Names used among themselves for the rest of their lives. For once, they said they felt as though they belonged. When Oliva decided the teachers and schoolmates were drawing his daughters away from the family, he ended the arrangement. They returned to sleeping and eating at the big house. Emily alone was allowed to remain at Via Notre Dame overnight because her seizures worsened by the tension at home, and everyone knew it. Through all of it, the classmates sensed something unspoken. Jacqueline Giroux remembered watching the five sisters sometimes go quiet and draw in on each other. A closing of the ranks she couldn't explain and never felt entitled to ask about. Connie Vachon had the same feeling. Something was off, she thought. She just couldn't put a finger on what it was. They were right that there was something, and the sisters wouldn't name it publicly for nearly over 50 years.
Something was off at home. You're going to get into that. But at the same time, I find it kind of laughable that with what the girls had already gone through, that somebody be, oh, there's something off about them. I'm like, of course there is. They were treated like animals for years, and they're raised in a pen with tourists looking at them.
Right.
Oh, I think there might be something off with them. And when I got to this part of the story, because this is the part of the story I didn't know, they had suffered so much already before they even went home, and it's just like they just never got a break.
Nope. At 20 years old, Emily Dionne had been living at a small convent in the Laurentian Mountains for less than 2 months, caring for elderly priests, finally free of the big house and the public eye. On the morning of August 6, 1954, she had a seizure during the night and was sent back to bed. The Oblate sisters who checked on her assumed she was sleeping. Sometime between 9 and 10 that morning, another seizure struck. She vomited, and with no one there to reposition her, she aspirated and suffocated. The news reached Corbeil by telephone later that afternoon. Alzire walked into the room where the others were finishing lunch and stood without speaking. Oliva Jr. got up and turned off the radio. The press got the cause of death wrong. The Toronto Globe reported a stroke. The Toronto Star said heart disease. Emily's epilepsy had been so carefully concealed for so long that even the editor of the North Bay newspaper, one of Oliva's few friends, had no idea it was at the root of her death. 5,000 people filed past her casket at the big house. The line outside stretched a third of a mile in the rain. Cars came from California, Florida, and British Columbia. A photographer arrived with a reminder that the sisters were still under contract for newspaper photographs. They gathered around the casket and posed. As Yvonne thought, looking down at her sister's face one last time, Emily is still playing the part of a quintuplet for the camera, even though she's dead. After the funeral, the 4 remaining sisters left Corbeil and did not go back. Yvonne and Cécile enrolled in nursing school in Montreal. Annette studied music. Marie, who had briefly entered a cloistered convent and found it too severe, came home and tried to build a life. According to Miller's account, Cécile later said of Emily's death and what followed, quote, "I remember feeling it was a sort of release, being that one was dead for all of us," end quote. The decades that followed were hard in ways the public mostly didn't see. 3 of the 4 married. All 3 divorced. Marie died in February 1970 at 35, found in her Montreal apartment several days after the fact. Her husband told the press the cause was a blood clot in the brain. She had been dealing with depression. By 1941, when the girls were 7, only $1 million had been put in their trust fund. When they turned 21 and became eligible to access it, only $800,000 remained, and that money was gone within a few years, consumed by marriages, houses, child support, and divorce. By the early 1990s, Yvonne, Annette, and Cécile were living together in a suburb of Montreal, pooling their pensions to survive on a combined income of $746 a month. It was Cécile's son Bertrand who began pulling at the thread. He traveled to the archives of Ontario and spent months working through the guardianship files. What he found, according to Miller's detailed account of the records, was systematic mismanagement on a scale that went well beyond carelessness. Over the course of the girls' childhoods, more than $2 million had flowed into the trust fund from advertisers, photographers, and filmmakers. More than half of it had been paid out in expenses, including the researchers' train fares, Dr. Defoe's postage stamps, the nurses' tennis court, an ambulance donated in the girls' name on their 7th birthday, and furnishings of the big house. The government's own official guardian had changed the girls' hotel meals to their account during overnight visits. The minutes from the guardianship's first 3 years had gone missing. The welfare minister, who had served as one of the original guardians, later burned the documents in his possession. The government lawyer who negotiated film and advertising contracts on the Dionnes' behalf had then resigned and gone to work for the companies he had been negotiating against. Jeez.
Let's also talk about the fact that this whole, government officials who are supposed to be regulating companies, then getting hired by the companies, is so criminal. We see it all the time with pharmaceutical companies, with oil companies. It's...
Well, lobbyists. I mean, there's people paid to lobby government officials, like essentially, let's take you out to dinner and then fly you to Aruba and do all these things.
But what's worse is the company is going, hey, just come here's a multi-million-dollar job for you. So they know those things are coming, so they don't give a hard time, right? They do it did you see that movie Dark Water or something with the chemical company?
Yeah.
All the people that were supposedly looking into that all got jobs with the chemical company, and that's why they were never properly rated. It's just disgusting. It's disgusting. Of course
they did. Yeah.
Those people, nobody went to jail for this, and they should have.
Everyone in the world is concerned on which side their bread is buttered. It's just the way things are. So when Bertrand's findings became public and Yvonne, Annette, and Cécile requested $10 million in compensation, the Ontario government, under Premier Mike Harris, declined to respond for months. When they finally did, the offer was $2,000 a month for each of the 3 surviving sisters, conditional on their signing a waiver of liability and agreeing never to speak of it publicly. The sisters turned it down. Good for them. In 1994, they dropped a bombshell. Annette, Cécile, and Yvonne published Family Secrets, the Dionne Quintuplets autobiography. In it, the 3 of them alleged that their father had sexually abused them during their years in the big house. The abuse, they said, began after the family was reunited in 1943. When Annette had told the chaplain at Via Notre Dame, he advised her to wear a thick coat and pray. Their siblings disputed the allegations completely. Quote, "We assert that we had good parents," Therese said on behalf of the surviving brothers and sisters. "To our knowledge, our father was certainly not a sexual abuser." End quote. The disagreement between the 2 halves of the family has not been resolved. Oliva had died in 1979, Elzire in 1986. There were no further proceedings related to the allegations. In March 1998, Premier Harris came to Annette's home in person. He brought a mocha coffee cake. He apologized on behalf of the government of Ontario, quote, all governments, he said, for its handling of the situation. The province then paid a $4 million settlement and agreed to an investigation into the trust accounts.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is they should have got billions. So all that money pulled in over the years that they were held hostage by the government in that cage in today's money, and with all the interest over those years, then some more billions from the big food and soap corporations because those big corporations made lots of money, so they should give a few billion as well. Let's make it a clean $10 billion, right?
Oh boy. Standing before a wall of cameras and reporters at a Toronto press conference shortly before the settlement, Cécile had read from a prepared statement. From Sarah Miller's book, quote, "We're not asking for 1 cent for the abuse," Cécile read. "There is not one check that has sufficient zeros to compensate us for having been kidnapped from our parents for 9.5 years and for wrecking our lives. We want only what was stolen from our trust fund. Instead, we've received an offer which seems to be drawn to intimidate and bully us. Allow us our dignity." End quote. In April 1995, Cécile had said, quote, "From our birth, we were taken hostage, deprived of personal liberty without being allowed to go out in public, and financially exploited until our majority." Yvonne died of cancer in June 2001. She was 67. Annette and Cécile asked that donations in her memory go to a national helpline for abused and troubled children, the same cause the three of them had supported together for years. For the next 2 decades, Annette and Cécile remained the only 2 people who had lived through all of it. The nursery, the gallery, the big house, Emily's death, Marie's death, the fight with the province. They gave interviews together. They appeared together at the rare public event. They stayed by every account exactly as close as they had been since they were kids. Cécile died in July 2025 at 91. Annette outlived all 4 of her sisters, and she died on December 24th, 2025 at 91 years old, from complications of Alzheimer's disease. She was the last of the 5 girls born in that little farmhouse outside Corbeil in 1934, the last person on earth who remembered any of it firsthand. The records remain, the guardianship files, the trust fund ledgers, the newsreels. The observation gallery is gone, the big house sold and resold, the farmhouse moved decades ago to a museum site further down the highway. What's left is paper, film, and the 2 books the surviving sisters wrote in their own words, the second one breaking a 40-year silence about what happened to them once the cameras and the fences came down. The story closed only a few months ago, but it took 91 years to get there. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 424, Lives on Display, the Dionne Quintuplets.
That's right, it's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Alrighty, we don't have any voicemails this week. It looks like we had one from around somewhere in British Columbia yesterday, but it's 1 second long. So it's like someone called, listened to our voicemail, and then hung up and said, "I'm not going to talk to those clowns." But yeah. And if you've already called us, but you haven't heard your voicemail, believe me, it's coming. We know you love us. Sometimes we record ahead. Shh, don't tell anyone. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. And we do have a single patron this week.
Yay! We like single patrons. We like married patrons as well.
No, like one patron is what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah. And that person's name is Ralph Castaneda. And Ralph is from Woodland, California. I wonder if he's related to the other Castaneda, Carlos.
Who's Carlos Castaneda?
Well, Carlos Castaneda was an occult, Peruvian-American occult author, trained as an anthropologist, and he claimed that he had been tutored by a Yaqui man of knowledge named Don Juan Matus.
Okay.
Yeah, and it turns out it was all a fiction. It was his way to essentially share his philosophy. It's really effective. It has to do with shamanism sometimes and a little bit of altered states of consciousness, if you will. But yeah. So I wonder if our new patron, Ralph Castaneda, is related to Carlos in some way.
Who knows? And if he is, he is, Ralph is a beatnik author. He's up there with Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, wow.
And so maybe he writes about his cousin.
Maybe he does. It could even be his dad. Who knows?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. But, that I like that last name, Castaneda. Castaneda.
Yeah, I think it could be. That's why I thought it could sound like he could be a beatnik author.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's kind of awesome.
He is bringing beatnik back.
Bringing beatnik back.
Well, but it was 40s and the 50s, wasn't it? So we're back again.
That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. And that is it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Goodbye.
Bye.